So, with the sad news of Cam Akers tearing his Achilles last week, I wanted to take a look at Darrell Henderson in this video. Now, Henderson was actually a running back that I liked a lot coming out of Memphis. I thought he was a perfect fit for the Rams offense. The way he effortlessly shifted gears to climb from the first to the second level, and really his vision to see backside creases form were the two main things that I really liked. Now, before we really begin, I'm going to ask you a favor and please like and subscribe to the channel. I'd greatly appreciate that. So anyways, since Akers was recently injured, I want to take a look at what Henderson brings to this offense. If there's one thing that stands out on film, it's definitely his speed. He hits the hole hard, he hits the hole fast, and that's generally his mindset and play style. The phrase all gas and no brakes definitely applies to this running back. Now, for this video, and typically what I do for every running back on this channel, I went through and tracked the number of snaps. This led to a grand total of 71 carries, and since that represented over 50% of his runs on this season, I felt like that was a good sample size. Here are those results. As you can see on the far right, the Rams offensive line in blue contributed an average of 3.4 yards per carry. Meanwhile, Henderson created 1.2 on his own. According to my metrics, this is roughly average. The second takeaway I had while going through his film was just how effective the Rams were on their gap runs. Henderson used his speed to win backside after the defense flowed in the direction of the offensive line. We'll look at an example of that shortly. Now, what I said here was also one of the key takeaways from my last video on Antonio Gibson. Both can hit the backside hard in order to create a lot of yards. Of these metrics on your screen, I think the lack of success on outside zone was pretty surprising. I expected that run to average more yards, but unfortunately due to a combination of poor blocking up front and facing some really good defensive ends, this definitely had an impact. Now, if you break these down further, Henderson's most frequently run plays from 2020 were all out of single back. You have outside zone being the #1 most called play, followed by duo and mid-zone weak. The thing that I found really interesting was just how much single back the Rams used while Henderson was on the field. Out of his 71 carries, a whopping 64 of them, or roughly 90%, were run out of this formation. This actually reminds me of the days with Todd Gurley. Back in 2018, it was something like 98% of his runs were out of single back. Before we look at our first example, I want to give a huge shout out to HelloFresh for sponsoring this week's video. HelloFresh is here to make eating better and easier. No grocery stores, no stressful meal planning, just everything to prepare a wholesome and delicious meal all delivered to your door. I honestly have no idea why I've waited so long to try it, but trust me, it was definitely worth it. This week, my wife and I tried the chicken sausage spaghetti bolognese. It was so incredibly good. This meal was one of their Hall of Fame recipes, and needless to say, we were very impressed. The produce was fresh and had a ton of flavor, the meat was portioned perfectly for both to share, and the recipe was so easy to follow, it made the entire experience effortless. HelloFresh has more 5-star recipes than any other meal kit, and they can all be finished in just about 30 minutes. Now, not only was everything delicious, but what honestly took the experience to the next level was just how flexible they were with my lifestyle. You can easily change your delivery days, you can add extra dinners or lunches to your orders, and in general, HelloFresh just makes the process so simple that I strongly recommend giving it a try. If you go to HelloFresh.com and use my code SAMGOLD14, you can get 14 free meals including free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com and use my code SAMGOLD14 to get 14 free meals including free shipping. So before the break, I mentioned that I was going to look at an example. Let's look at a run play called Duo Wrap. This is typically run out of single back, and sometimes the offense will add a jet sweep action in order to fully sell the movement to the weak side of the formation. That's what happened here. Now, this play should look very similar to a zone run. This is on purpose. The goal of this play is to create misdirection for the defense by getting them to flow in the wrong direction before the snap. Not only does this help the offensive line establish angles, but it also helps open up the hole off the left edge. Other teams like the Packers and the 49ers will also run this too. I want you to pay close attention to how the offensive line blocks their respective defenders. We have multiple double teams. Meanwhile, in the backfield, the running back will use counter footwork in order to sell the misdirection even more. He'll take a zone-like step after the play begins, and this also sells the movement to the defense. As soon as he takes the ball, the offensive line is already in position to seal their defender's front side. This is what opens up the huge hole. Then the wide receiver who is on the sift motion hugging formation, he'll lead block for the running back. Since safeties will often approach the line of scrimmage to help protect the boundary, that wide receiver will then be used to blast them out of the way. The running back will press that block, and then he'll read the lineman down the field who reach their second levels in order to determine his cut. This is where having a speed back like Henderson really pays off. Yes, the blocking was incredible, and again the defense was clearly out of position, but speed kills on these types of plays. The other thing I'm going to point out here is that if you're a fantasy football fan like myself, it really doesn't matter if the running back or the offensive line and scheme created this hole to begin with. This is a 10+ yard play, and that's good for fantasy points regardless. Let's look at another example against the Seahawks. Pay close attention to how the misdirection helped steal the linebackers out of Henderson's way. I love how he stepped inside, pressing the left shoulders of blockers, all before bursting towards the sideline. This allowed Henderson to take advantage of this hole. So while plays like this happen pretty frequently, the outside zone to the strong side and mid-zone run to the weak side were very frequently called plays for the Rams. As you can see, once the offensive line starts moving horizontally, which causes the defense to run with them, this is what creates some pretty big gashes in defense. Henderson did a good job throughout the season of taking advantage of these holes. Then when you factor in the post-snap motion, like using sifts and orbit motions, which happen on roughly 35% of his carries, these really created some big holes. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but Henderson is a running back who primarily uses speed and hip drop in order to create plays. For a running back of his size at 5'8" and 208 pounds, he has a pretty good contact balance to stay on his feet. According to PFF, he broke a tackle in 17% of his runs. This is roughly average. While this is the case, pairing his speed with that contact balance will always be a threat. That, in my opinion, is mainly what Henderson has to offer. With all that being said though, my one main negative for Henderson comes back to that strength. Too much speed can be an issue. What I mean by that is that he has a really hard time pairing cuts together. He'll make one cut, then will often outrun any potential second level lane. He'll even sometimes run into his own blocker because he thinks he has to hit the hole at 100% speed at all times. Henderson needs to play more patiently. He needs to slow down to 80%, then he needs to use his burst to accelerate after he patiently sets up his block. If you want an example of how to do this effectively, look no further than Todd Gurley. The dude was so patient, and the dude was so good at slipping the first tackle to eke out that extra yard. He was a perfect zone running back before he suffered his injury. If I was Henderson, that's who I'd try to model my game. I'd throw Gurley's tape on from 2018, and I'd analyze every single step of every single snap, and I'd try to imitate that style. In my opinion, this will pay massive dividends to him in the long run. Outside of this, I think Henderson also does have a habit of trying to bounce a run too hard outside. Sometimes he'll push too horizontally as opposed to cutting north to south when needed. This didn't happen a lot, but it did happen enough times that I made a note of it. Overall, if we look at the Rams holistically, you can tell by all the plays I'm showing you that their running game is pretty well coached. They constantly blasted open holes for the running backs. However, this offseason, they did suffer some key losses. First, they lost tight end Gerald Everett. He signed with their division rival Seattle Seahawks, and I think the threat of him underneath will hurt this team. On top of this, the Rams also lost their center Austin Blythe to the Chiefs. Blythe was very good in this scheme, so I expect he'll play very well for Kansas City. Now to replace him, the Rams have their 4th round pick from 2018 starting. Brian Allen, who played for Michigan State, has limited tape, and so far throughout his career he's dealt with a few injuries. I hope for his sake he can adapt himself and prove any doubters wrong. The final 2 losses I'm going to mention are both on the coaching side of this team. The Rams lost both Shane Waldron, who's the pass game coordinator, and they also lost Andy Dickerson. Dickerson was the assistant offensive line coach. Neither, in my opinion, will drastically affect the strength of the run game. They might have more of a negative on the pass game, but it's just a bit too early to tell in my opinion. Now, while together this represents a good number of changes to this team, the Rams are still returning 4 of their starting offensive linemen. I feel like they won't regress that much. They were a top 5 run blocking team according to PFF last year, and I completely expect them to finish in the top 10 at the very least. They are still a very talented group, and I think Henderson will still create some pretty big plays in this offense. So to wrap this up, what does this all mean for Darrell Henderson? In my opinion, he's still in a great spot to be a starting running back on your fantasy team. He's still relatively cheap, and he has the potential to put up a monster game. You give him an inch or an open hole, and he has the explosive ability to take it the whole distance. I don't think he'll finish as a top 10 running back, but if he ends up as a great RB2 putting up over 1,300 total yards, this honestly wouldn't shock me. He has the talent to do it, and the Rams offense should be good enough too. Well, that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Next up, I want to break down Calvin Ridley. In just a few short seasons, he's become an elite route runner in the NFL. This dude is a top tier player, and we need to look at him closely. If you haven't already, please do me a favor and like and subscribe to this channel below. I'd greatly appreciate that. As always, thanks again for watching, and you can find me on Twitter at SamuelRGold.